it's really hard to be small, but it's really a lot harder to be small with two owners of a business. And that's probably why you don't see this a lot. Welcome back to Midweek Modern Craftsman, where today I am diving into a listener question from Ryan, a residential builder out in San Diego. If you have a question that you want answered on the podcast, or you're curious about something, shoot me an email, tyler@trghomeconcepts.com, and maybe I'll record a podcast on that topic. Basically, free consulting. So Ryan says that he is a residential builder out in San Diego, and he has a topic that he finds interesting or potentially interesting for myself and the listeners. And he goes into how he recently started another business with a younger GC out in San Diego. They're doing custom remodels, ground up builds, medium to high end. They come from a finished carpentry background. They both enjoy self-performing, but they were struggling independently while self-performing to handle the scheduling, project management, business management, etc. So here's his email. I feel like with all the books and podcasts out there, the coaching folks are saying basically stay small or go big, nothing in the middle. Take off the tool belt if you want to raise your ceiling. You'll be trapped in business, self-performing. So he understands this dynamic. He's also worked with many other successful contractors, plumbers, carpenters, electricians who made great money, but were always stressing over time and management. He says that he's also worked in other small businesses and started other small businesses, physically building and running coffee shops, coffee roasting business here in Southern California. And he's totally gotten caught in the weeds and had to build his way out of the hole that he created. So he understands both sides of the coin. And he got out of those businesses for a reason. He just wants to build stuff and not be dealing with all the bells and whistles of running a large scale business. He believes building can be straightforward and simple and more gratifying when done right. Plus, he just likes it more. But he also, here's the caveat, he wants to make some money, which I find most people who are in my shoes or a belt-on contractor, self-performing contractor, small-scale contractor, doing it for the love of building. They want a simpler lifestyle, but they don't understand how to make money alongside of that. So with that being said, his buddy Bobby was running his own GC business, constantly stressed out. He was caught in that trap that everyone gets caught in. And he is a very skilled contractor with a management background, ultra high-end finish background, but he could never find the balance between trying to make money and not having to work 24/7. Product always turned out fantastic, but at a cost that more than even himself would expect. So after years of talking about it, they decided to team up 50-50. Two GCs tackling the task of building custom homes, self-performing where they can and where they want, while being realistic with themselves when they must sub the work out. So he says they've been working now for a few months, trying to figure out their workflow with two guys instead of one. Also attempting to not just take on double the amount of work because there's two of them, and that their goal is to take on 1.5 times the amount of work of a solo man. The phone continues to ring. They're getting the ball rolling. And Ryan here is curious if I have any feedback or suggestions for a setup like this. He never really hears anyone talking about this. Maybe it's more common than he thinks, or maybe it's just crazy and stupid and people don't do it for a reason, but he's curious to find out. And so far, it feels like it could be a cheat code. Unique setup and a good emotional and mental support that most contractors don't have access to. So sure, they're going to split 50% of the profits, but if we're self-performing some selected trades, they can make their money where they want and pick and choose work based on how much time or money they need at any given time of their lives. I can foresee the challenges of figuring out distinct and concrete roles for each of us. The that are valuable and measurable and fleshing that out over time. Curious to what you think. Let me know. Thanks for taking the time to get this long email. Love the podcast, particularly your style of, you don't need to hear all that stuff. Appreciate it, Ryan. Appreciate the email. Appreciate the discussion topic. Again, if you're interested in getting basically some free consulting or at least my thoughts on something, shoot me an email, tyler@trghomeconcepts.com for podcast topics. So a couple of things that I want to think about, and I wrote some notes on this one because it's not my topic or podcast idea. And there's a lot packed into this email. So just off the top of my head, treat your owner labor like your most expensive subcontractor. If you're planning on self-performing, something that I do a lot of, I want to ensure that if something happens, if I get hurt, if I don't have time, if something else comes up, that if I have to subcontract a project out or a aspect of a project out, that I'm not going to get burnt because I priced it lower by self-performing. So I make sure that I'm not undervaluing my time. Define your roles now, not later. Even if it doesn't wind up being that way with a partnership, at least get a basis for what those roles look like. Don't depend on time to sort that out. Don't depend on this organic evolution. Set distinct, clearly defined goals. If they change, but sort that out ahead of time so there's efficiency, there's not an overlap, you're not building resentment when somebody ends up doing more than the other person. The 1.5 times work thing, I get that. For me, when you have two owners of a company, you're going to need to produce more than 2x, I feel. 1.5 doesn't work for me. A lot of times that doesn't work when there's one owner. So I don't know what your structure was like before, what type of money you were making before. It looks like you weren't making too much money. But for me, when you have two owners, you need to be making more than 2x of one person because you have two people looking to capture a premium based rate. Decide how you guys are going to make your money. Is it through the carpentry? Is it through the project management? Is it through the self-performance, through pre-con, margin on subs? You need to understand how you make money on certain jobs in order to understand your marketing and everything else. Talk about that uncomfortable stuff now. If somebody gets burnt out, if somebody gets injured, right, your self-performing work, how does the compensation work? Is it still 50-50? Is labor paid out separately? Just some things that you might want to dig into there. So those are just some quick topics off the top of my head that I want to dig into a little bit more deeply. But my overall take in this is that it's not crazy, but what I find challenging, especially with this setup, and I'm not trying to dissuade you guys from doing this, and I hope that it works out really well. It's based on the way that I make money. So the way that I make money is I have a markup on subcontractor work. I'm accounting for time within that scope for me to fine tune whatever I need to, because that's what I'm selling for my clients. So I have money on top of my subs to be able to fine tune work if need be. But my work is based on my premium, which is absorbing and capturing the overhead of the business plus the premium that I need to make as a business owner, because I don't want to go work for $100 an hour for myself and own a business and take on all the liability, all the risk, and have to cover my overhead within $100 per hour cost or whatever I'm budgeting for labor, right? It needs to be a premium-based labor. I also need to earn a higher markup on subs, and I need to capture my management time. So for me, that winds up being really tough, especially with your 1.5 times the amount of work, because for me, 1x the amount of work doesn't even really work just with me. I need to produce, I need to create efficiencies to be able to put work in place and spend less money in order to make money. So my business, I may not have a huge amount of sales, but I really control my overhead by being a self-performing contractor. I'm getting a premium for my rate. I'm not making massive markups on labor that I have working for me. I have a decent markup on subcontractors because I'm not performing the work. I'm also capturing my management time, but I can't charge $150 an hour for myself plus $80 an hour for a helper because I'm just going to be pricing myself out of things. So if you and your business partner are looking to team up and you're looking to self-perform together, you guys would have to put a lot of work in place to capture two owners' salaries and two owners' rates while being on the job. For me, I don't live in a market where that makes sense. If I put 2x my labor on a job, I'd have to have 3 or 4 people on the job producing that amount of work, or else it just doesn't make sense. It's not an equitable investment for my clients. So I have to align myself with somebody that is a lower rate in order to make it work and to remain competitive, or I have to put more work in place. So that's one of the biggest issues that I see with two owners of a company. Unless you grow, unless you scale, or unless somebody's fully owning just the back end paperwork of the business and then somebody's owning the field work, it's going to be hard to absorb the costs of both of you and the overhead of a two owner business doing 1.5 times the amount of work. You have to scale up at that point in order to capture two owners' rates in residential construction, right? So you're going to have to do a lot more work. Somebody's going to have to just manage the field work. Somebody's going to have to manage the office work, and you're going to have to put more work in place, way more than 1.5 times that, in order to absorb the cost of that. So some of the advantage of this, right? There's real advantages to the mental relief and the shared emotional load. It's having a partner, it's having a wife, it's having somebody who can understand what you're going through, and you're going to tackle this at the same time, even if it's not a quantifiable amount, right? Or it's not a tangible amount. There's somebody there on your team that has your back, and there's something to be said for that. That's real, and you may not be able to place a number on that, but that is something that is absolutely real. And at times, pie in the sky, I wish I had a business partner that could take half of this burden, or hey, this person, it'd be really nice to bring this person on and they can own part of this business. I'll give them stake in the business. But realistically, that's really tough to do. So you will have higher quality if you guys are self-performing. There's a higher quality control. I would argue anyone that somebody who self-performs and quality is a concern for them, that they're going to get better results subcontracting. It's going to cost more if you're subcontracting it, because the amount of management that it would take and communication and the systems that you would have to create to get that level of detail. Smaller company with the owner of the job wearing a tool belt, you're going to get a higher quality job if quality is the utmost important to them. And I will take that one to the grave. So you're looking to have some flexibility in your workload, being able to self-perform, being able to sub out. I think that's good. You're not pigeonholing yourself. You guys will have the ability to take on multiple projects at a time, which I think is going to be necessary for you. Again, that 1.5 times work is a concern for me. I think that you're going to have to take on more than that, and it's going to be through multiple projects, which is it might put you in a space that you're looking to get out of right now, to be honest, unless you guys have clearly defined roles and one person's handling the back end, one person's handling the field work, but then that's going to take your model of self-performing out the window. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. So there's some flaws right now that I'm seeing within what your needs are, what your hopes are, and what the business model will actually afford you guys. So that's something that I would really consider with both of you guys on the job, or at times self-performing, then both of you handling the business. And is there overlap? Are there inefficiencies because somebody's not picking up where the other person left off? You have the ability to create a division of strengths and to have accountability with each other, right? You can dedicate somebody to client management, somebody to estimating, somebody to carpentry, somebody scheduling, pre-con, financials. I think that this is really the path forward for you guys, but you have to make sure that you do it in a way that doesn't get you into that vicious cycle that you feel you're in right now, where you're just doing everything and nothing's getting done at the same time. So some of the cons, which I guess I just listed while I was talking about the pros. But you have to make sure that there are not undefined roles, because undefined roles lead to resentment. When somebody says they're going to do something and then they don't do it, or they get sidetracked. I mean, Nick and I are partners in a podcast, and there's times where the communication isn't there. Nick's doing one thing, I'm doing another. We don't have shared values. We don't have alignment. But at the end of the day, Nick and I understand this is not our primary income. It is not our main job. We have other things in our lives that consume our time and are priorities for us. So we're of the mindset where let's do as much as we can. I'll pick up the slack when you don't have time for it, and vice versa, but it's not our main source of income. If it was our main source of income, there may be resentment there if I'm making all the money and Nick's doing nothing. If Nick's making all the money and I'm doing nothing. But it's been almost 10 years that we've been in business together, and we understand there's ebbs and flows, and this is a side venture for us. So it creates less resentment, less stress for us. If we don't make money, it's okay. We're doing it because we feel that we have a greater impact, and we're not looking as the podcast to support our lifestyles. So you have to understand when you're self-performing that it can fully affect your profitability depending on what type of business you are running. Are you T&M? Are you lump sum? Are you cost plus, right? Self-performing versus subcontracting, what that looks like, how contractually you are protecting yourselves there, how to avoid scope creep, misallocation of time. There's all of these things that you need to be aware of and ensure that you're protecting your profitability, because ultimately that's going to be really, really important when you have two business owners in a very small business. There's just not a lot of pie to go around, and you have to make sure that you're both getting a big enough piece of pie to satiate your needs. Understand that you guys may have different risk tolerance. So have a discussion about how much risk you're looking to take on, what type of jobs, bigger jobs, more subcontractors, what you feel like with regard to debt, equipment, hiring, all of those considerations. Now you have two people who may have two different risk tolerances that you need to ensure are on the same page. And then the 50-50 profit split, you have to make sure that people are accounting for 50-50, right? It's not as though you have somebody on your team who you could replace, you could hire out. You have two people who really are part of that business and vital to that business, and they're not going anywhere. So you have to make sure that if it's 50-50, that 50-50% of the work is going into it. So some pinch points that I think you guys might hit early on in this venture, just roles, again, estimating, pricing, who's estimating, who's doing the work, who's covering the field, how are you getting paid for that, how are you tracking cost, how are you accounting for that in your overhead, ensuring that you're not a business where you're just doing all of that for free, especially when you have somebody who is allocated to those tasks now and they have other stuff to do during the day. You have to make sure that you're capturing the cost of all of that back end work, which is tough when you're a small business. I know I struggle with it. I've found ways in my business to do that, but you have to make sure that, especially when that's somebody's clearly defined, distinct role, that you're covering that cost. How are you handling pre-con? Right? Is that just one person? Is client expectations fielding those calls? Is there a better salesman of the two of you? You have to understand what that looks like. Again, just the tool belt time versus the business time. Is that something that you're both sharing? How are you splitting that? Are you just looking for the emotional support here? Are you really looking to create a business, right? Is this just to make you feel as though somebody has your back? Or are you looking to grow a two-man business? Because for me, this is like, it's really hard to be small, but it's really a lot harder to be small with two owners of a business. And that's probably why you don't see this a lot. To me, two owners of a business, you just need to do more work. Again, this might not be what you want to do. growth pressure. I think that you guys will realize as you get into this and as you evolve into the business that you want to be, that you understand your costs, because it's very important when it's just one business owner. But when you have two, it becomes more muddied, it becomes more convoluted. The numbers are not quite as clear. So you have to understand what those numbers look like with the two of you, how you're spending your time, how you're capturing those time, and if you need to grow, what does that look like? What do those roles look like? What happens to the overhead? What happens to the amount of work that you can produce when you realize that somebody just needs to be handling the business end of things, right? How are you capturing that overhead? How are you dealing with the inefficiencies of now not having two people in the field? Are you going strictly to a sub-based model and then one person being essentially a super or a PM, which I feel like the PM would be the back end office type of person. So those are obviously concerns for me. And some of the key takeaways, just quickly listening to this, and I want to be as delicate as possible here in telling you, in being straightforward with you, because I don't want to get on here and be like, yeah, this is amazing, great idea, it's a cheat code. Absolutely, it might, and it might work for you, and I don't know your market, and I don't know the type of work, and I don't know your numbers or anything like that. So yeah, this may be 100% cheat code for you. I can only look at this from the perspective of my market and the type of work that I do in mid to high end renovations, and not super high end. Like, or I'd say it's not even mid to high end. I'd say it's like upper mid renovations that I'm doing for a very discerning client that has specific needs. But I work for that market, and I do the type of jobs that I do because I understand my rates, I understand my premium, I understand there's a very specific client and type of job and scale of work that I need to be doing for those clients. So that's why I do the work that I do. I thought I wanted to be more in a high-end market. I realized that the high-end market consumes too much of my time. I can't subcontract as much as possible because there's just too much communication and too much time and too much management required, that I price myself out of the high-end jobs. And I know that that may sound insane, but I really do, because it to do those high-end jobs, say it takes 90% to get to the mid-level renovations that I'm doing, or upper mid-level renovations, and it takes 90% of my time. To move up, it might take 120% of my time, right? So it's like, I'm those type of jobs, it's not like, oh, I just need to go an extra 10% to get to those upper end renovations. They consume more than that. They might consume another 90% of my time. So now I'm at 180%. You're saying, well, that's impossible, you only have 100% of your time. That's when I need to bring somebody on, right? Because I can only give 100%. And at this point, do I want to give 100% to every single job? So I created a business with the high-end renovations where I needed to be on the job. I needed to manage the employees. I also needed to have the employees. And then I needed to handle the business end of things in order to execute at that level. The jobs were just too complicated, and it was costing me money, and it cost me a lot more time. So I realized on the mid-level renovations, or the upper mid-level renovations, that I don't have to be there every single hour. I can still use subs. I can sprinkle on top my own labor to fine tune that. I don't need to maintain the overhead of having multiple full-time employees in vans. I can still sell a premium based service. So I'm getting the best of all worlds for myself. It's not fully consuming me. I'm making the margins that I need to. And I just learned that through trial and error. And I understand where I live now. And I understand, yeah, that's a no for me, or yeah, this is a potential lead for me. So those are things that I would want you to consider with your business, and what the numbers look like and what you guys need to make. Like, sit down and figure out what you want to make. His lifestyle may require more money than your lifestyle, and maybe you don't want to work more. So how are you going to compensate him more? How are you going to afford him an opportunity to make more money within the business without just creating chaos for you that you may not want. If he does need more money or vice versa, is that going to change your lifestyle? Is that not something that you want to sign up for? So understanding your numbers, understanding what you guys need to make, what your goals are, what your roles are. For me, again, I'm just looking at it. I don't chase scale with my business. I ensure that I'm capturing my rate as a business owner. I ensure that I'm marketing towards the right jobs. But I'm also I have a very distinct and specific client base. But one of the ways that I make my money by not having to sell $5 million worth of work in a year is by controlling my overhead. And that means that I can't bring somebody on board where it's just two people on a job that I'm paying my premium base rate and then I'm paying $75 an hour for, because I'm going to price myself out of those mid-level, upper mid-level renovations. But I also, that's not enough manpower to execute the higher end renovations. And when you add up the hours of myself and a premium based helper or employee, I'm pricing myself out of both jobs because it requires so much of my time on the higher end renovations that I'm exhausting my budget. And on the smaller end renovations, I'm not landing them because I'm not remaining competitive when you add those two together. So that's something that's going to be really important for you and your business partner to understand where you live. Maybe you guys just perform the higher end renovations. Somebody handles the back end office work, somebody handles the supervision in the field, and you guys subcontract and you get rid of the self-performing aspect of it, because at that point now you're able to charge a premium, you're able to bring your subs in, you can make a markup on them, you're getting paid for your supervision, you're absorbing the cost of the back end within your markup on your subcontractors. You're more of a cost plus type of contractor on these builds. Maybe that's what works out for you, but I'm just not sure. And there's a lot at stake when you have two owners of a business. I mean, there's a lot at stake when you have one owner of a business, but I'm able to keep my overhead really lean and make a higher margin on a lower volume of work or revenue that I'm bringing in a year. So I think it's a great idea. I hope that it works out. I would be lying to you if I told you that I never wished or never had this idea of, hey, here's so and so, he has his own business. We're just tired of working together or working alone, independent of each other. We're going to join forces. It's happened a multitude of times throughout my career. But when I realize that it may not be possible, I may not remain competitive, that I might make less money, that it might complicate my life more, I've always shied away from it. And I think, and I could be wrong, that most of the times that I was looking to get into a partnership, podcast aside, like if it were for my main source of income, it were because I was struggling, possibly financially, but also emotionally. It was just too heavy for me. There was too much responsibility. Things weren't going right, and I wasn't making enough money. So it seemed as though it was an answer to my problems. And what I did was I really inventoried my business, and I realized that my business was the issue, that my model was the issue, that there were a lot of things that I wasn't doing right. And if I simply create a business that made me more money and preserved more of my time, that it wouldn't be as emotionally heavy for myself. And when I started finding a business model that led me more towards that type of lifestyle and business, there were way less emotional burdens. I was less focused on work being my identity. I was making money. I was more content. I wasn't having to work 80 hours a week, and I didn't feel as though I needed to spread that burden across multiple business owners. So it's my business is very simple. It's a very unique business. I am definitely in a niche, but it's all by design and it's intentional and it really makes sense for me. So again, I don't know your market. Maybe this is a cheat code. So that being said, again, I want to reiterate a few things that I would do immediately is just define those roles and try to create as little overlap as possible. The answer may not being both of you in the field. That's going to be tough to pay two owners' rates for two carpenters in the field unless you guys are putting 5x the amount of work into place. But at that point, I feel as though you probably have to be lump sum because you're just creating a ton of efficiencies. And if you go down to an hourly or you go to cost plus, the optics of it just aren't going to make sense. So define those roles: who's dealing with clients, who's taking in leads, who's estimating, who owns the financials, scheduling, who's doing the site work, who's supervising subs, who's self-performing, who is handling material acquisition, permitting, all of that. Everything that is required of a business. Start defining your roles now and try and break that down into 50% overlap with as little 50% distinction with as little overlap as possible, because when you guys are overlapping your time and you're overlapping your efforts, those are all costs that you are going to absorb and you cannot capture, you cannot charge for, and you're going to take a massive hit. So make sure there's very little overlap on each of your roles and responsibilities. Start tracking your time, both of you, immediately. Track what you're spending offline, track what you're spending online, track every single aspect of your job. Even if you just take a really small sample window, do it for a week and then do it for 4 weeks and then do it for 6 months and then a year. Start tracking your time, understanding how much time you guys are actually spending on the business, spending in the field, and separate them within the business to understand, hey, yeah, on this type of job or on this square footage of house build, this is what we're spending as far as time, and assigning labor rates to all of them and understanding how much time you're actually spending. If you guys don't start tracking your time, there's going to be no way to understand your efficiency, your profitability, everything else. So start tracking them immediately. There's a lot of straightforward costs of your business that are very easy and transparent to understand as far as overhead goes, right? What's your general liability insurance? How much does your office cost you? What are your vehicles? All of it, everything that's going to be captured within your overhead, even if you didn't take on jobs, and then figure out what your job costs are. But those are all very easy to understand and to capture and to integrate into your numbers. It's especially a small business, it's very transparent. What's really difficult to capture and to quantify are some of those intangibles, some of the areas where your time gets wasted, where you're fielding phone calls, where you make a mistake on the job, where there's downtime on a project, where there's weather on a project. And when you have two people instead of one person where they're not capturing that time, it can be really difficult for both of you. And I think that it can create more angst and more resentment where somebody feels that they're putting more effort into keeping this thing afloat than the other. So understand all of those inefficiencies, all of those downtime for both of you. And you have to make sure that whatever that the straightforward overhead, as well as the inefficiencies and the downtime and the overlap of your work, that needs to be accounted for in your numbers. And when you start figuring that out and getting more accurate numbers, understand, is that a competitive rate? Are you going to land work at that rate? Is there opportunity to charge more? Is there a different type of job that's going to support that rate? You have to understand all of that for your business. And that's where it gets tougher when you have two business owners, but you have to start figuring those things out. Track your numbers right away. It's just like, it's mandatory for business, and the more people you have, the more difficult it can be to understand what those numbers are. So to me, that's just a huge recommendation. So I hope that this was helpful for you. Obviously, there's a lot here. It probably comes off as me saying, yeah, this just isn't a realistic venture. For me in my market, it would be tough. I don't want to dissuade you. If anything, I want to encourage you to make this work, because I think realistically there's a lot of other business models in this world that have multiple business owners and they've found a way to make it work. And I think that it's like a marriage, it's like any other partnership, right? When you have two people sharing the good times and you also have two people sharing the hardships, it just makes life easier. I find that a lot of times in my market, clients are not willing to pay for that emotional support. It can be built into other businesses, but for our business, with how competitive it is, it's really tough. I hope that you guys can make this work. I don't mean to be condescending or negative or unsupportive of this venture. I just the point of this podcast is to make sure that you're aware of all of the concerns that I would have going into this. And this is the way that my brain works, right? I'm going to look at all of the risk. I have a very low risk tolerance, and I'm going to quantify that. Even for a lot of those more subjective aspects of life and business, I'm going to try and quantify that into a more objective metric for myself. And then I'm going to say, is it worth it? Or is it sellable? Is it marketable? And I have a low risk tolerance. So that's why I have the business I have. That's why I do what I do. You get somebody like Nick, who's my partner in the Modern Craftsman, and he has a very high risk tolerance. So we're different people. We make it work. But this is the way that I analyze any business. This is the way that I would analyze what you guys are looking to do. And for me, it's never made sense, because I think it would come at a concession of me, and I know my personality type, and I know that I'm just going to do whatever I have to get done, and I know that that can create resentment for me. So I understand that it won't work for me, but I hope that it does for you, and I hope that you begin to understand what it takes one day at a time to make this work. And those are some of the recommendations that I made in this podcast for you to help not only understand the marketability of this business model and this venture that you're taking on, but how to preserve the relationship between you two outside of work as well, because you guys have a relationship outside of work. And it's tough when you bring somebody in and then money is introduced and stake is introduced and resentment can rear its ugly head. So do what you guys have to do, obviously, to create a sustainable business, but also just a sustainable relationship between you two, right? How are you going to preserve the relationship between you, whether it works or it doesn't work, that you don't tarnish and you don't ruin this friendship or this relationship, this partnership that you guys have moving forward? Because at the end of the day, that's really important. Just like Nick and myself, if finances came in between us, or if ownership or stake came between us, I would rather preserve my relationship with Nick, somebody who is my best friend, is my business partner, is somebody who emotionally supports me, vice versa. Just a really, really great relationship for me. I would rather preserve that than make money. It's more important to me at almost 40 years old, when I look at big picture and my life. That's something that's more important to me than just making a quick buck. So make sure that you guys are obviously looking at the business metrics of this, but also you're looking to bring somebody on for some emotional backing. Like, you can't deny that. So this is somebody who's very important to you and very important to your life. And make sure that you're creating a business model that continues to maintain and support that. All right, guys and girls, that's it for this week. Appreciate your time. Sign up for the email newsletter. We are giving away 50 free tickets to IBS. So if you want to go to IBS and you want a free ticket to the show, sign up for the newsletter. I will be emailing everyone with those free tickets here shortly. Also, you can email me, tyler@trghomeconcepts.com. And if I have time, I will send you a direct link to that. Once the 50 tickets are gone, they're gone. I can't do anything about it. So sign up for the newsletter, get the free tickets to IBS. Hopefully, I will see you there in February. Thanks again for the email, Ryan. I hope that I didn't come off as too negative with all of this. I hope the best for you and for Bobby. I hope that this all works out. I really just wanted to give you a realistic perception of what this might looks like and what you need to put in place to ensure that you protect both your business, your lifestyle, and your friendship. All right, guys and girls, I'll catch you on the next one.